Long, long ago, in a time of golden palaces and shimmering deserts, there lived a king named Ahasuerus. Now, this wasn't just any king. He ruled over 127 provinces, stretching all the way from the colorful markets of India to the tall mountains of Ethiopia. One day, in the 3rd year of his reign, the king decided to throw the biggest party the world had ever seen. For 180 days, he showed off his riches and his sparkling jewels. And when those days were over, he threw another feast for 7 whole days in the palace gardens of Shushan. But on the 7th day, the king's heart was merry with wine. He called his 7 messengers and gave them a royal command: "Go, bring Queen Vashti before me. Tell her to wear her royal crown so everyone can see how beautiful she is." The messengers hurried to the queen. But when they gave her the message, something amazing happened. Queen Vashti looked at them and said, "No." She refused to be treated like a trophy. She wouldn't go. When the king heard this, he was very wroth. His anger burned inside him like a fire. He called his 7 wise advisers, men who knew the laws of the land, and asked, "What shall we do? The queen has not followed my command." One adviser named Memucan stepped forward. He was worried. He said, "Great king, if the women of the empire hear that the queen said no, they might stop listening to their own husbands. You must send out a new law, one that can never be changed. Let it be written that Vashti may never come before the king again, and give her place to someone who is better than she." The palace grew quiet, and the queen's throne sat empty. The great feast was over, but a new story was just about to begin. The story of a girl named Esther.
Time passed, and the king's great anger finally cooled. In the quiet of his palace, he remembered Vashti and the law he had carved into stone. His servants saw this and proposed a grand plan: "Let us search every corner of the empire. Let the most beautiful young women be brought to the palace of Shushan. Let them be cared for and prepared, and the one who pleases the king most shall be queen instead of Vashti." Now, in the city of Shushan, there lived a man named Mordecai. He was a Jew who had been carried away from Jerusalem long ago. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, but everyone called her Esther. She was an orphan, and Mordecai had raised her as his very own daughter. She was not just beautiful, she had a grace that lit up every room she entered. When the king's decree reached their home, Esther was taken to the palace. She was placed under the care of Hegai, the keeper of the women. Right away, Esther stood out. She didn't demand fancy jewels or expensive perfumes, she was kind and humble. Hegai liked her so much that he gave her the best place in the house.
But Esther had a secret. Mordecai had warned her, "Do not tell anyone who your people are." And every single day, Mordecai walked back and forth in front of the palace courts, just to catch a whisper of how his dear Esther was doing. Finally, it was Esther's turn to meet the king. While other girls asked for gold and fine clothes to impress him, Esther took only what Hegai suggested. The moment King Ahasuerus saw her, he loved Esther more than all the others. He took the royal crown, placed it upon her head, and declared, "This is my queen." He threw a massive celebration, Esther's feast, and gave gifts to all his provinces. But the story doesn't end with a crown. One day, while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, he overheard 2 guards whispering a dark secret plan. They wanted to hurt the king. Mordecai quickly got word to Queen Esther, and Esther told the king, making sure to give Mordecai the credit. The guards were caught, the king was saved, and the whole brave deed was written down. But every great story needs a villain, and one soon emerged from the shadows of the palace. His name was Haman. King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, setting his seat higher than all the other princes in the land. The king even gave a special command: whenever Haman passes by, everyone must bow down and show him great respect. So day after day, the servants at the king's gate bowed low. All except for one. Mordecai. He would not bow. When Haman saw it for himself, he was filled with a cold, dark rage. But hurting just Mordecai wasn't enough for a man like Haman. No. He wanted to destroy every single one of Mordecai's people. Every Jew in all 127 provinces. Haman went to the king with a silver tongue. "Great king," he lied, "there is a certain people scattered throughout your kingdom. Their laws are different from ours, and they do not keep your laws. It is not good for you to let them stay. If you let me destroy them, I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into your treasury." The king didn't even ask who the people were. He took the royal signet ring off his finger and handed it to Haman. "Keep your silver," the king said. "Do with these people whatever you think is best." The command was terrifying. On a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, all the Jewish people, young and old, women and children, were to be destroyed. A dark cloud had fallen over the city. Mordecai's secret was out, Haman's trap was set, and the lives of thousands now rested in the hands of a young queen named Esther. When Mordecai learned of Haman's cruel plan, his heart broke. He tore his clothes, put on rough sackcloth and ashes, and walked through the center of Shushan, crying out with a loud and bitter cry. He went as far as the king's gate, but he could go no further. Esther sent her trusted messenger, Hatak, to find out what was wrong. In the street before the gate, Mordecai told Hatak everything. He told him about the money Haman promised the king, and he handed Hatak a copy of the terrifying decree. "Take this to Esther," Mordecai said. "Tell her she must go to the king. She must beg for mercy." She sent a final message to Mordecai: "Go, gather all the Jews in Shushan. Fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will do the same. And then I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish," she said, "I perish." Mordecai went away and did exactly as the queen commanded. Esther stood at the edge of the inner court, her heart racing beneath her heavy royal robes. But when King Ahasuerus looked up from his throne and saw his queen standing there, something softened in his eyes. He didn't call for the guards. Instead, he reached out and held toward her his golden scepter. Esther stepped forward, her hand trembling as she touched the very tip of the gold. "What is it, Queen Esther?" the king asked, his voice kind. "What is your request? I would give it to you, even if it were half of my kingdom." But Esther was wise. She knew she had to lead the king and the villain Haman into a place where they would listen. "If it pleases the king," she said softly, "let the king and Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared." The king agreed instantly. Haman left the palace that day walking on air. He was so proud. "The queen only invited me to eat with the king," he boasted to his wife, Zeresh, and all his friends. As he passed the king's gate, his joy turned to ice. There stood Mordecai. And once again, Mordecai did not bow. He didn't even move. "All my riches mean nothing," Haman hissed to his wife. "Not as long as I see that man, Mordecai, sitting at the gate." His wife and friends looked at him and gave him a wicked idea. "Why wait?" they said. "Build a gallows, 75 feet high. Tomorrow morning, ask the king to hang Mordecai on it. Then, you can go to the queen's banquet with a happy heart." The idea pleased Haman. That very night, sleep fled from the king. He tossed and turned, but rest would not come. So, he gave a strange command: "Bring me the book of records. Read to me the history of my reign." As the dry voice of the scribe filled the room, they stumbled upon a forgotten entry. It was the story of Mordecai, the man who had saved the king from the 2 guards who wanted to hurt him. The king sat up straight. "Tell me," he asked, "what honor or dignity has been given to Mordecai for saving my life?" The servants looked at the records. "Nothing, Your Majesty. Nothing was ever done for him." Just then, a shadow fell across the outer court. It was Haman. He had arrived early, his heart full of malice, ready to ask the king for permission to hang Mordecai on his new gallows. The king called out, "Who is in the court?" "It is Haman, Majesty." "Let him in," the king commanded. Haman marched in, chin high, thinking his moment of victory had arrived. But before he could say a word about the gallows, the king asked him a question. "Haman, what should be done for a man whom the king truly delights to honor?" Haman's heart leaped. He thought to himself, "Who would the king want to honor more than me?" So Haman came up with the grandest, most royal plan he could imagine. "For such a man," Haman said, "let him wear the king's own royal robes. Let him ride the king's own horse, with the royal crown on its head. And let one of your most noble princes lead him through the city streets, shouting for all to hear, this is how the king honors those he loves. The king nodded. A perfect plan. Haman, hurry. Take the robes and the horse, and do exactly as you have said. For Mordecai the Jew who sits at my gate. Do not leave out a single detail. Haman's face went pale. His knees began to shake. He had to take the very man he hated, dress him in the king's glory, and lead him through the city, shouting praises for his enemy. After the parade, Mordecai quietly went back to his place at the gate. But Haman rushed home, covering his head in shame and weeping. When he told his wife and friends what had happened, they looked at him with fear. If Mordecai is a Jew, they warned, and you have already begun to fall before him, you will never win. You are surely going to fall. And while they were still speaking, the king's messengers arrived. Hurry, Haman, they cried. The queen's banquet is ready. The king and Haman sat down to dine with Queen Esther for the second time. The music played, the wine flowed, but the king's mind was on one thing. He looked at Esther and asked for the third time, What is your petition, Queen Esther? Even to half of my kingdom, it shall be performed. Esther looked the king in the eye and said, If I have found favor in your sight, O king, let my life be given me, and the lives of my people. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. If we were only being sold as slaves, I would have kept my silent. But our enemy cannot repay the damage this will do to you. The king's face turned like thunder. Who is he? He roared. Where is the man who would dare to do such a thing in his heart? Esther didn't blink. She raised her hand and pointed directly across the table. The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. The king was so full of rage that he stood up and stormed out into the palace garden just to catch it. Haman knew his time was up. He stayed behind, falling onto the couch where Esther was sitting, begging her for his life. But when the king walked back into the room and saw Haman on the queen's couch, his anger exploded. Will he even attack the queen right here in my own house? As soon as the words left the king's mouth, the guards stepped forward and covered Haman's face. He was a condemned man. Then Harbona, one of the king's messengers, spoke up, Your Majesty. Did you know that Haman built a gallows 75 feet high in his own courtyard? He made it for Mordecai, the same Mordecai who saved your life. The king didn't hesitate. Hang him on it, he commanded. And so, they took Haman and hanged him on the very gallows he had built for Mordecai. And finally, she told the king the truth, Mordecai is my family. He is the one who raised me. The king took off the royal signet ring, the very one he had once given to Haman, and placed it into the hand of Mordecai. Esther then set Mordecai over everything Haman had once owned. But even with a ring and a house, Esther's heart was heavy. She fell at the king's feet once more, her face wet with tears. O king, she begged, save my people. Reverse the letters Haman wrote to destroy us. For the second time, the king held out the golden scepter. Esther rose, and the king spoke, I have given you Haman's house, and he is gone. But a law written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can never be erased. Not even by me. But the king had a solution. Write a new law, he commanded. Write it however you like in my name, and seal it with my ring. Mordecai didn't waste a second. He called the king's scribes together. They wrote to all 127 provinces, from India to Ethiopia, in every single language and every script. This new decree gave the Jews the right to gather together, to stand for their lives, and to defend themselves against anyone who tried to harm them. When Mordecai finally stepped out from the king's presence, he looked like a new man. He wore royal robes of blue and white, a great crown of solid gold, and a cloak of fine purple linen. The city of Shushan, which had been so confused and afraid, suddenly erupted in joy. People were shouting in the streets. For the Jews, the darkness was gone. They had light, and gladness, and honor. In every city where the decree landed, there was a feast and a good day. The orphan girl was now a powerful queen, the humble man at the gate was now the king's right hand, and a day of sadness had turned into a day of great victory.
Thanks for watching. If you want to see more stories of courage and faith, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an upload.